Thank you. God, I hear that you have loved every minute of it, and I've heard you're exhausted. And I know that you have had a huge amount of information shared, and that you've scribbled down, or that you'll look at in the tape and be reminded of it and try to process it and absorb it all. So I don't know how long I'm going to talk. If there's time, we'll do questions and answers. I'm a grandmother, and I'm so worried that some of you haven't eaten. It's kind of all I can think about. Will you raise your hand if you haven't eaten? Oh no, can you? I don't even think I can go on. I'm seriously. Terry, can you get them some food? Siri, do you want some macadamia nuts? Are you hungry? Oh, I'm sick. I'm just sick to my stomach. Okay. All right. So I'm going to talk tonight about the debt of honor that I first mentioned in Bird by Bird 25 or 26 or 27 years ago. And everything I say about writing really has to do with any kind of creative endeavor or passion, talent, or drive that you are either involved with or want to be involved with. So the debt of honor means that you owe yourself this new life where you're starting over right now. You know, Saturday morning, that you just start over and you push back your sleeves and you're in a way that is different than it was maybe just in the summer. And you owe yourself this, and you are owed this because you have paid through the nose with your giving to everybody else on earth since you were a very small child. And you have done everything they said and asked, and you have tried to be who they said you were, and so on. And now it is time for you to take a long, quavering, deep breath and do the sacrament of ploppage and plop down into your life, plop down into your inside self, plop down into this new promise to yourself that you're going to get serious now about the art that longs to be created using your hands, your heart, your soul, your spirit, and your kitchen table. So you love to write because you're here and you have to pay for it. Or you want to write, or you used to write, or you want to start again. You were good in college, you were good before you had children, you were good before you joined the service, you never got around to it again. But there's the debt of honor means that there's something inside of you that's like a calling, like a calling to the priesthood, or a calling to be a poet, which is a religious calling. And the calling is to create poetry or written stories about life and yourself and humanity and what you make of it all, and our deepest shared truths as they have uniquely been expressed through your life and your experiences in your karass, your people, your galaxy. But it's so hard to get started. It'll be really easy to start tomorrow, and then it is so hard to stick with it. I know what it's like, because writing's really hard. And I know people have been mentioning that all weekend, but writing is hard, like practicing any skill is, like piano or Spanish or tennis. It's all the same. You agree to start, and you have to agree to not be any good at it. You know, you don't want to learn to play piano because you have longed to learn to play the farmer in the dell. You know, you want to play piano because you want to jam with people. You want to play with other people. You want to play some songs you've always loved. You want to play some really simple Chopin etudes. You don't start with The Farmer in the Dell. You just, you know, I mean, you do, unfortunately, start with and you play The Farmer in the Dell really badly at first, and no one wants to hear you continue. And I can tell you this as a universal truth, no one in your family wants to hear that you're writing a memoir. It's really the worst news they could hear. Because for some, I think probably most of you come from extremely healthy families where the parents had gotten a lot of therapy for their tiny control issues and self-loathing. And they worked very hard not to pass on the shame and the urge to dominate to you. But for several of you here, you have some amazing stories to tell. Flannery O'Connor said that anyone who has survived childhood has got a lifetime of stories to tell. So, but your family, I mean, I think most of you are fine, but as I said, the several of you whose families had tiny, dark secrets and atrocities unfolding nearly every day, will try to talk you out of doing that, of telling your stories. They're going to tell you that the way you remember it has nothing to do. It was actually fine. Mom and Dad really loved each other deeply. Mom didn't drink. Mom napped a lot. You know, Dad wasn't violent. Dad was working something out. You know, and it was every so often one of you got in the way. But it's not what you think. It's not the way you've always told people. No one's going to want you to tell your stories. And you have to do it as a radical act, because not a single one, I think there's 250 people here and there's 1,000 online. None of us knows how long we're going to be here. You know, and if we meet back here in a year, some of us won't be here. And it won't just be the older ones, because life is very lifey. And things happen. And so you don't know. You think you've got years to tell your stories and to get to work. I just want to tell you, just don't. So you start now, and it's going to go really badly. Here's the thing. If you don't honor that longing inside of you to get to work on your stories, your poetry, your memoirs, your screenplays, whatever, something inside you will begin to atrophy. And that will be heartbreaking. That will really hurt your heart. Your creativity and curiosity muscles will atrophy. And exercising the curiosity and awakening and creativity muscles is why you're here. And whatever age you are, you know, you just are, to awaken, to be curious, to create, and to help others awaken and create. Toni Morrison said the function of freedom is to free someone else. It's not to get free and gloat about it and then try to monetize it. The function of freedom, and there are a lot of sober people here. I won't name names, but we got sober, and the only way we could stay sober was to help other people get sober. That we were pulled out of the slough of madness, and the way we stayed sober was to reach behind us. And that's what's going to happen for you as writers, that when you get that freedom, the way you keep it is to give it away. You offer yourself in small groups at convalescent homes, at your children's schools, to a funny little writing group in your neighborhood, you know, in your airstream, 4 of you. And you say, you know what, I've been to a conference, I heard a lot. Can we make a commitment to meet here every second Thursday? We'll take turns bringing snacks, and we're going to have pages to share. But I have been doing these conferences, and I've got some stuff I can turn you on to. Okay? So if you don't do it, if you don't honor that, it's going to lead to disappointment and regret, and you're just going to want to kick yourself because you have seen so much and been through so much and survived so much. And all of those things have turned out to be stories that you've told to people in your family, you told your grandmas, you told your grandchildren, you told your nephews, you told your girlfriends and your guy friends, you told people these stories, and they seem to find them interesting. And you want to get them down on paper. Otherwise, it's all going to be lost. All that living you did, all that surviving, that growing, that awakening, that transforming, that coming through against all odds, it's going to be lost. So you start to get it down. To do that is really hard at first, but doing it daily, the writing is nautilus of the soul, and you will build muscles. I never want to write. I'm never in the mood to write, believe me. But I do it because I've been doing this full time since I was 20, out in Bolinas, and I did it every day because my dad was a writer. He said, you do it every day or don't do it at all. And I took that to mean 5 days a week. But you do it every day or you don't do it at all, because you got to build those muscles of being uncomfortable, of wanting to be somewhere else. So, and a daily work life is really attainable, but it's like a daily walking life, where you get your steps every day, no matter what. Whatever your steps are, 4,000 is a lot of steps. Now, I've been reading all year that 10,000 steps was totally arbitrary, that a man, right, it's just a crock of shit. Now, a Japanese man who was marketing a pedometer, marketed by saying, now you can get your 10,000 steps. You don't need 10,000 steps. They don't think that science, look it up. Google 10,000 steps and you will find that if you get 5,000 steps a day, and that's a lot. If you get 5,000 steps, that's amazing, right? I think it's worth it if you can, if you don't have mobility issues. And I think it's really worth to sit down every single day and get a couple of pages written. But it's hard at first. I want to talk about that. So how do we do that? How do we commit to the pursuit of a writing life? How do you, when you leave here today, reinvigorate that thing inside of you, that jungle drum that says, God, I want to do this. I was talking all weekend to these people and we were comparing notes on what we've written or what we want to write. And it just made me so excited. How do you put that into a daily practice? Well, you decide to, you decide to, you announce to. Before you leave tonight, announce it to your table. I've decided to. And you stop not writing. Right? That's actually the most valuable advice I have for you today, is to stop not writing. I stopped writing for about a year and a half after my last book came out. And I discovered I love not writing. I mean, it's one of my favorite things that I do, is to not write. And I loved it on the surface, though. I loved it in that way that I love certain kinds of food that make me ill, or that I can't stop eating once. I loved it in that kind of, I love a fix. I have a history of addiction to every single thing and kind of behavior you can develop addiction to, except for gambling. Which is what my friends say is a big yet for me. But I love anything that will change the way I'm feeling. And so I love the surface, relief of not having to write, not being on a deadline. I've been on a deadline since I was like 24. But beneath the surface was that pulse I mentioned. And that is the pulse of your creative child. You see kids with pencils and construction paper and safe scissors and glitter glue and glue sticks. And you just see how they get lost in it. And they're so happy and they're so lost. And that's the pulse. It's this quiet, benevolent jungle drum that is just thrumming with memories and ideas and visions and structures that might work, and an eagerness to be back like in kindergarten at the artist easel, you know, where every kid got one and people weren't looking over your shoulder going, really? Like, that's the best you can do? Oh, you smudged it. Or, you know, that you all were just painting. You want to get back to the pottery wheel where you're pulling up the rich black or gray clay of your lives, of your histories, of your memories, of your dreams, and you're shaping it. You're shaping it into something beautiful. And God or life have chosen your hands to make this one specific thing with. You know, remember lying on the sidewalk or in the driveway with chalk and a friend, or you see your nephew and niece do that, and a whole morning can pass just lying on your tummy with colored chalk. You've done it with little kids. You've done it with bored little kids who could lose 2 hours doing it. That's what writing is like. But the sidewalk is your desk or your kitchen table, and the chalk is your pencil, or probably more likely some sort of keyboard. So I want to tell you everything that helped me go from not writing for a year and a half to starting a new book a few weeks ago. And I'll tell you only things that are actually legitimate. And some of you have heard this. You've been to my writing workshops. I only know a few things, and they still work. You know, they worked when I was a young writer coming up, and they work now, and I believe they'll keep working. I want to tell you everything that helps me break through that terrible self-esteem that all writers share. And I know Sark talked about her inner critic, and I love the story she told, and it's better than anything I'm going to share on the inner critic. But my husband has clients and workshops where the discussion is on the inner critic, because the way that he described it to me, when we're young children, we need that voice that kind of badgers you or controls you and tells you not to run into the street, tells you don't know how to swim in the deep end yet, tells you how to be a girl that society will love, tells you how to be a boy that society will love, you know, but it's a parasite. And by 6 or 7, we're very good with traffic safety, you know, and by 7, you know exactly how far out you can swim and that you never swim alone. I made up like 6 rules for Jax when he was little. The first one was, Nana must never be hurt or squirted. That's the main rule. But the second rule is, you should never run out into the street and you never swim alone. So that is the inner voice. But by 6 or 7 or 8, you know that you know, I don't swim alone. I do sometimes, but you don't go out into you look both ways. You have a habit, right? And you don't need that critic. And the work Neil does is identifying it, keeping you small. And I know from a perspective of being a girl and then a woman, it keeps you small and it keeps you from being too juicy. You get big and juicy and you are doomed. You are exiled. When I was a child in Tiburon, the women that got big and juicy got divorced. They were divorced, they were put in the bin, and they were exiled. You also didn't get angry, right? So you got angry, you got divorced, or you got put in the bin. So, and now we get to be big and juicy and angry, and we get to cry until we don't have any tears left. And the inner critic will say, oh, no, you don't. If you get it, no, stop crying. That person died 3 months ago. Come on. They say, that inner voice says, really? And so the work Neil does is to notice it. And you as writers can start to notice it, saying, you can't tell that story. Or that's not how it happened. Or I don't think that's that interesting. I don't think, in fact, anyone will find it right? Those are probably the 4 voices that you're going to be in trouble if you tell it. It's not true. You're going to be exiled if you tell it, and I forgot the fourth one. And so what you do with this work is to start to say to it, oh, it's you. I'm good right now. Thank you. You kept me alive. His clients all say, thank you for keeping me alive. I'm going to take over from here, one day at a time. That's one thing that it really helps me, is to notice this voice that doesn't think, that is desperate for validation, desperate for the right people to think I'm doing a good job. And you know what? Horribly, it's an inside job. I have had everything good happen for me that can happen to a writer, and it didn't work. If you go to Sam and Reese's hellohumans.co, you can subscribe if you want to. You can go there for free. You can hear incredible talks. You can hear Julia Cameron. You can hear Sam interviewing 200 people, artists and philosophers, and on how to human and how to create. My favorite is Paul Williams, who the songwriter and composer. And as you know, he won an Oscar for the Evergreen. And he tells Sam, and they both end up in tears because it's so awful that this is true. He wins an Oscar. He's an addict. He's an alcoholic. He's me. He's who I am without a lot of other sober people helping me. And he gets up there and he's in front of hundreds of millions of people receiving the single greatest reward and accolade the creative world has to offer. And he tells Sam, it bought me 24 hours. Right. So you have to learn with that to thank the inner critic for its help, keeping you alive, and get on with it. The most valuable thing I heard this year, the most valuable new writing thing I heard this year, I'm on page 1. I'm so sorry to tell you, I'm going to pick up the pace a little bit. The most valuable thing I heard was the screenwriter, Randy Mayhem Singer, who wrote Mrs. Doubtfire. And she says, tell me a story and make me care. Okay? That's what you're doing. That's all you're going to do is tell me a story and make me care. Why would I care about your character? Well, because it's probably some aspect of you and I would care about you. And because it's somebody trying to find their way in this world that is so chaotic and disorganized and disappointing, and jerks win, and we're disappointed and whatnot. So that's your job, if you're going to be a writer, is to tell me your stories and to make me care. Now, I read this thing. I don't know if you can see it over here. You can get up and mill if you want to. I didn't get the writer's name because what I did was I copied it and pasted it to a note. And then, but I didn't copy down where I seen it, who to attribute it to. But it said it's a writer's job to be curious, to observe, to question, to try and better understand, and give language to some of the vast and varied ways of being alive in the world. The fear that I will fall short, that I will fail to convert my ideas in a way that resonates with readers is real and ever present. But I have realized that it is also a part of the draw and the ongoing challenge. And it is why you're here. And if you take a picture of it, you will have a photograph of why you're here. Now, the wonderful Curtis, well, first I have to say, I developed this structure that works for me because I'm old and disorganized, and I have a lot of people on my property I care about, and I have multiple dogs, and you know, I'm losing ground, right? And so instead of in the old days where I used to sit down for 3 hours, I can't focus for 3 hours anymore. And so what I do is I set aside an hour. I call it a pod. And in an hour-long pod, I can work for 45 minutes. I can maintain focus. And I pray for focus for 45 minutes. And a 45-minute writing of memories of anything will take an hour. Except for some of you young people. And if you're able to work for 5 and 6 hours at a time with a lot of focus, that's very nice. And then you bribe yourself. And with raising salmon, also raising jacks, or grandmothering him, you just work with bribes and threats. If you know, it's how to raise children, bribes and threats. If you do this, I'll give you $7.50. If you do this, I'll make you a sandwich. If you do this, I'll take you to Target. I'll take you to Best Buy to get that thing you want, you know? And if you put in an hour, 45 minutes of writing, you get a bribe. Half of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And so then Curtis Sittenfeld, who's a wonderful young novelist, you've read some of her books, none of which will come into my memory right now, but it's easy to find out. It's Sitten, S-I-T-T-E-N, Field. And she wrote down the stuff I love. Step 1, look at your calendar and decide in advance which days and times you'll write. An ideal schedule might be for 2 hours each on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Okay? But whatever you can manage is fine. Though your story also can be any length you want. Short stories encapsulate everything from flash fiction, which can be just a few paragraphs, to Alice Munro's epic, stunning 70-page short stories. It's useful to have a rough idea of how long it will take to write it. My essays on Facebook are 1,000 words. Those take me 2 hours to write an incredibly shitty first draft, and they take another hour, and they're not even 1,000 words. So if you write slowly and poorly, you know, welcome to the monkey house, as Kurt Vonnegut put it. You know, that's what it takes. Okay, different writers set different goals for themselves, shooting for 500 words, and then she put in parentheses, or 250, this is about 250 pages, a manuscript page. Or 500 or 1,000, or writing for a set length of time, including something known as the Pomodoro technique, like Pomodoro pizza or something, Pomodoro. You'll have to Google it, that breaks your workday into 25-minute chunks. You can keep space of your progress in the space at the right. I love that. 25-minute chunks. Also to do in advance, decide where you'll write and what has to happen so that when it's time, you're ready. Okay, so I decided, it's back to me. So I decided to start writing as a radical act. I decided to begin something I had vaguely understood to be on my heart, which was essays on love. Essays for when I'm gone, when Sam and Jax are here, and all of their friends who I love so much. Reese is my other son. Jax's friends I've known, and they've been sleeping at my house since kindergarten. There are certain things that have always worked and will work again. And no matter what the environment looks like, especially if we lose the house, I'm just saying, no matter what the environment looks like, certain things will work and be true that they can turn to. And I want to write those for them. They all have to do with love. They have to do with like divine love, the love of nature, the love of creativity, community love, the community. And so I just started writing these essays. Okay, so one tool I love are, and you get to find what works for you. It's like finding out how to eat, you know, that what worked for other people may not work for you. You have to find what is true for you, when you like to eat, what you like to eat, what is safe for you to eat, and so on. And you have to learn what's true for you. But one thing that works for me is legal paper, legal sheet pads, because they're really long and they're for scribbling. That's what lawyers use. Legal pads for scribbling. And I'm going to talk a tiny bit more about scribbling, but you can sit down in a quiet corner of your house, and I'm just going to use a memoir because it's easy for me to talk about, but whatever it is you're writing, say it hypothetically a memoir, you write down, you scribble down every memory that you want to write about at some point. You write about your school years, you write about kindergarten, you write about the nightmare of junior high, you write about college, or in my case, dropping out. You write about then what happened when you were 19 and you forgot to have a degree or any skills or whatever, and you scribble. You write down the holidays, you write down the relationships, you just scribble it all down. Because otherwise, if you sit down and let's assume that you're working on a computer probably, you're just going to be staring at, it's like staring at an unassaulted light ice flow, you know? It's all blank. So you just scribble. I swear these legal pads really, really help me. Then I have a tool called Scribble in a Mass, Scribble in a Mass, Scribble in a Mass. And before you start the actual body of the work, you start filling up. Sometimes people think they have writing block, but what they are is just empty. They are strung out. They are exhausted. They are existentially exhausted by life right now. And they are exhausted by having worked 7 days a week for 2 weeks running. And they are not about to sit down and start their memoir, but they can carry around paper or their phone. I mean, I'm always explaining why I love index cards and pens, but my family will tell you that all of my blue jeans have leaky pen marks in the back. But anyway, I love paper, I love pen, I love that ancient sound of pencil or pen on paper. And I happen to live with, I love index cards, but your phone will work in a pinch. But you scribble in a mass, and I've always imagined there's a sort of Dr. Seuss character in my soul, like right here in my solar plexus. And my job is to amass fabric for the Dr. Seuss guy to create these quilts, my creative quilts, to create blankets of stories, blankets of memory, blankets of whole towns. But you're going to also need thread, right? So you have to also be gathering thread. It could be dental floss. It could be raffia. Or is that what that stuff is called, Terry? It can be, you know, that crazy ribbon that you use on birthday presents where you go and it curls, right? And you could be any kind of thing that you can use to connect these quilt squares and that you can hand down to the rag bag guy. And so you can do scribble in a mass, scribble in a mass. You can do that all next week and just start to see what it is, what's on your heart, what wants to get itself written. Okay, now, if you've been to my writing workshops, you know, or if you read Bird by Bird, I only have 2 real things that I can teach you. One is that you do it bird by bird. You do it like bead by bead, as if you're creating a necklace. You do it, I used to, in the old days, hand out 1-inch picture frames to my writing workshops at Book Passage because you think you need to create a whole book. You need a whole project. You really only need to write as much as you can see through a 1-inch picture frame. That's it. Bird by Bird is a story from my older brother's childhood, his education in 4th grade that he hated school all of his life, and he didn't do it well, and he was always behind, and he got bad grades, and he'd had a whole semester to write a term paper on birds, which we all had to do in California in the early 60s. That was how your first term paper, right? Because in 3rd grade, you have those lined sheets of paper with space to draw and color at the top, and then you write a term paper in 4th grade, and he hadn't started. He was overwhelmed, and my dad sat down with him with Roger Tory Peterson and Audubon. My brother was crying. My brother did not cry and does not cry. And he was crying. And my dad said, just take it bird by bird. We're going to read up on magpies, and then you're going to tell me in your own words about magpies. Okay, and then we're going to draw a picture, or we're going to cut one out from these magazines we have. Then we're going to do chickadees. Okay, just read about chickadees and tell me one, right? That's all you have to do. Buy yourself a 1-inch picture frame. They're $2.99 at Target. You probably get 3 for $2.99. Give them to each other. Give them to each other. That's all you have to do on any given day. And E.L. Doctorow, I can't teach writing without quoting the great novelist E.L. Doctorow. If you don't know him, you need to. Ragtime and Book of Daniel, and it's a beautiful, beautiful writer. And he said once on the topic of writing, he said, it's like driving at night with the headlights on. You can only see a little ways in front of you, but you can make the whole journey that way. And actually, all of life is like driving with the headlights on. You can only see a little ways in front of you, and you can make the whole journey that way. Surviving a loss. I was going to say surviving having a baby. Yes, surviving having a baby, surviving not having a baby, surviving having a parent who has dementia. Everything is like driving at night with the headlights on, but no one tells you that. When you're growing up, you should know what you're doing, decide what you're doing, and then do a really good job with it. And you can't, and Neil and I were laughing about this. They forgot to mention to us when we were young that you get to change your mind. You know, I mean, I think I was in my 30s when that came up. Really? And then I talk a lot about really shitty first drafts because you all think that I write well because you've seen my third and fourth drafts. But every single writer you love writes terrible first drafts, terrible, unreadable. And then if you're writing a novel, it's going to take you a whole first draft to even know who your characters are. And then you write a second draft, and it's going to be better because you're going to go through it. And I said in Bird by Bird, the first draft is a child's draft. You just get it all down. You're kind of romping all over the page. You're getting it all down. The second draft is grown-up draft, and you get a little strict. You start taking stuff out. You described in 4 pages a dump run you took with the neighbor's child, and it's good material, but maybe it's 2 paragraphs. And you take a lot of it out. But you know, those 4 pages gave you those 2 paragraphs. So none of the time, and nothing is wasted. Nothing is wasted. Jessica Mitford, the great nonfiction writer, said, as a writer, you've got to go through it and kill your little darlings. You've got to just take out your favorite little things you wrote and came up with. You've got to take out the flashy stuff. You've got to take out the stuff that's funny, so you want people to think that you're doing better than you are. You know, you take out the stuff that just makes you sound so educated. You just take it out. I do a draft where I go through and I take out the lies, you know? And that's the adult draft. And the final draft is the dental draft. And you are going to love those if you will stick together, if you will get some work done. The third draft is the dental draft. You go tooth by tooth. This tooth is strong. This tooth needs support. This tooth needs a filling. I need more flossing. This tooth is doing better. Wow, there's more bone than there was a year, you know? So that's the dental draft, but it's all shitty first drafts. Some quick things I want to say. You're going to feel the inner critic over your shoulder. We just do. And as you're practicing, thanking the inner critic for his thoughts on how disappointing you've turned out to be. One thing that's helped me a lot is to write my material as a letter. Maybe there was someone at your table here that was really safe, and when you told your stories, they said, "Oh my God, I love that. Have you written that?" Write it as a letter. Now, I use my younger brother, Steve-O, and you're all welcome to use him because he's a very gentle, brilliant guy, and he's the gentlest, sweetest soul, literally, on earth. You can ask husband, grandson, son. He just is. You can ask Harriet. He just has this dearness. And so you can put at the top of the page, "Dear Steve-O." You know, I want to tell you a story about the last thing I remember before we left Florida, because it was very painful and very exciting, and I don't want to lose that feeling. Right, dear whoever. I mean, really, if you met my brother, you would put "Dear Steve-O," but, and you're welcome to put "Dear Annie," put it to me. I would never look at your work and go, "Really? Really, Diane?" You know, what I would say is, "God, this is incredible. This is 5 pages. I love some of it. I love the character of Beth Ann. I think that the descriptions go on too long. I had no sense of the location. I need you to read about locale, Google locale, Google setting. You know, it'll all be there." So letters to Steve. Okay, now, Neil has a website called, it's the title of his first book, which is called shapesofTruth.com. And you can go there, everything is free, and there's 34 writing tips. And they're really good. You don't have to do it now, and 5 of them will sing to you. But if you go there, one of the things you'll see, and this is one of the most important things you'll take away today, is write from the verb. You know, get your verb right. You don't need adverbs. You know, Joseph Keller submitted a 1,200-page manuscript for Catch-22. And it's, I think, 600 pages as published. And somebody had interviewing him said, what did you take out? And he said, adjectives and adverbs, right? You don't want adverbs. So you find your verb. You work with it. You wait. You sit there quietly. You close your eyes. With Jax's little ones, when he was like kindergarten, first grade, I would teach this class, these writing workshops. And I'd say, close your eyes. There's a movie screen behind your eyes. What can you see on it? Describe that to me. You want to tell me about a scary thing that happened in the forest? Close your eyes and look at the movie screen. In the dark, what do you see? What kind of trees? Pine cones, probably, if you live around here. Redwoods, probably, if you live around here. What did you hear? Can you remember? No? Make it up. But find the verb over and over again. So you say, you write down, well, so my mother walked across the lawn towards me. Really? Your mother is really neutral and sees you and just walks really neutrally towards you? Your mother has no agenda, no resentment, no plans for your betterment? Did your mother lurch across the lawn? Did she glide across the lawn? Did she stomp across the lawn? Did she stream across the lawn towards you? Did she army crawl across the lawn? What's the verb? That's another thing. Okay, another thing some of you don't know is that you can get a lot of help. There's a lot of help out there. There's writing groups, there's writing classes, and there's each other. And there's someone here that you would like to see every week that you don't otherwise. And you say, like Terry Tate was in my first writing groups at Book Passage. And she formed a writing group, and a group of 4 other people formed writing groups, and they stayed together for years. And they met at Book Passage, and they got a cup of tea and a pastry. And they bonded in the deepest part of their hearts, because when you hand over these pages for someone else to read, you're handing over some very deep stuff, and you're trusting them. And the writing group is about trust, and it's about the joy that you're not all alone in it. And another thing that really, really helps me is that I sometimes call people and I start a tape recorder going and I say, talk to me about, you live by the beach. Tell me what the beach is like in winter. Okay? Tell me about the desolation. Well, there's actually no desolation. It's 1 trillion piles of driftwood and plastic bottles from the storms, and it's this and it's that and the way and whatnot. And I tape it and then I get it transcribed. And then the best thing to do is to interview, and the transcriptions online are so cheap and they're overnight. Just Google transcription services. They're so cheap. And the best thing to do is interview yourself. What do you remember about your first year being sober? What do you remember about your child leaving home? What do you remember? What do you think love is? I want you just to talk stream of consciousness. What is love? Where do you see love? I take my Sunday school kids out for love walks. Where do you see love? Well, we see it in the flowers. We see beauty. We see love as rain, the water, the flowers. We see love, they're related. We see love that you're so patient with us. We see love that you get us really incredible snacks. I have a grown Sunday school student here, and she will attest to the fact that we had sparkles, we had glitter, we had glue sticks. See, she's nodding. We had Capri Sun. Every week we had Capri Sun. We went for walks and we looked for love. And I can do that for 10 minutes and get it transcribed. Then what I do is this kind of crazy thing that might not be what works for you, but I have a laundry cord strung. I have a very tiny office. I don't know that it's, what is it? Is it 10 by 10? Not even. 7 by 10. It's 7 by 10. It is so perfect. It is so, so, so perfect. and I have a laundry cord strung from one end. I mean, it comes to about here. And then I have clothespins on it, and I print out and I print out and I print out and I print out. I print out stuff I've written and I clip it to the laundry cord so it can air out, you know, so that it can get my hot breath off its neck. And so that then if it's there, more stuff occurs to me. And I'll scribble it in ink on it. I'll take it down, I'll scribble on it. But have it up. Get it printed. Send money to the Sierra Club. Send money to Greenpeace. But print out your work. Get it off that weird little radioactive box, you know, and get it and go read it in window seats, you know. Okay, prompts. If you Google writing prompts for when you're stuck, for when you have done scribble in a mass and you're exhausted by scribble in a mass, go do some writing prompts. Your first memories, your first holidays stick with us because they were very heightened. For some of us, they were a nightmare. For some of us, we lived for them. For some of us, we just dreaded them. We were physically ill by the time the day arrived. For some of us, we have memories that it happened. You know, we were 6 years old and this thing happened. It all came together. How often in your life did it happen? It happened. You know, your first memories, vacations you took as children. Maybe they were primitive. We didn't go very far. We didn't have money to fly anywhere. We had a cabin out in Bolinas that we went to once a month or something. We went to the Russian River. You know what? Tell your vacations you'll remember. Write about why you write. Here's a great prompt. You're about to fall asleep and the phone rings. You assume someone has died, right? I mean, I naturally would. If anyone here's phone rang as they were getting ready to go to sleep, I would assume someone had died. But that's just me. That's growing up around alcoholism and a really, really unhappy marriage. But what do you think? The phone rings. You've just turned off the light. You've been reading. The phone rings. Who is it? And what happened? Why are they calling? God, maybe it happened for them. Maybe it happened for them. Anyway, it's a good prompt. Two best friends have had a disagreement. You and your best friend have had a disagreement. What happened? Tell me the story. That's intense. That's the end of the world. That is really scary. How did you come back from that? Did you? And here's my favorite prompt of all, and I got to finish in a sec. Sam and Reese and I did some interviews with Mark Yaconelli. Oh, go to hellohumans.co. And he did a beautiful, beautiful interview with Sam on his book. And it's about this healing work he does as a missionary of storytelling. He goes to communities where there's been a fire or a shooting, a school shooting. He goes to communities of deprivation, of desolation, of whatever. And he gets 20 people, and they tell stories over the weekend. And they get to know each other. And they get to say stuff that no one else seems interested in. And people clap for them. But go find it. You'll love it. And he talks about writing a lot. But he was at Book Passage, where all good things happen. And he talked about, he gave us a writing prompt. He said, there was a tree. Right? There was a tree. That's your prompt. Well, what tree comes up for you on the screen behind your eyes? There was a tree. What happened? Something excruciating? Did you get a miracle at that tree? Did you plant that tree? Did you plant a tree for each of your nieces and nephews? There was a tree. I said to him, can I have that? I thought it was the greatest prompt I've ever heard. There was a tree. That's where you start out. The writer's job is to see what is behind the visible stuff, the home movies. The writer's job is to see what is behind it, to see the bleak, unspeakable stuff and the wild, lovely stuff that no one else noticed. and to turn it all into words, not just into any words, but if you can, into rhythm and blues. You can't do this without discovering your own true voice, yours. And you can't find your true voice and peer behind the door and report honestly and clearly to us if your parents and the inner critic are reading over your shoulder. They're probably the ones who told you not to open that door in the first place. You can tell they're there because a small voice will say, oh, whoops, don't say that. That's our secret. Or that's a bad word. Don't say that. Or don't tell anyone. You do that, they'll all start doing it. So you have to breathe or pray or do therapy to send them away. Write as if your parents are dead. If people wanted you to write more warmly about them, they should have behaved better. Okay? And you get it down in the child's draft, and the adult draft can go through it with you and maybe have a very brief discussion on slander and libel laws, and you can decide what you can get away with. But the truth is that you just write it as fiction. You change people's hair, style, and color. You change their height, you change their gender. You make them not your family, you make them a family across the street. There's a way. But that voice is going to tell you, don't do that. That's our secret. You said, if you signed a contract at 4 years old not to tell, right? Most of you did, that the long bony finger was going to come down from the sky if you told, right? And so we'll discuss, well, I'm not going to be able to discuss libel with you tonight. But anyway, why though, my students ask, staring at me intently, why are we supposed to open all these doors? Why are we supposed to tell the truth in our own voice? And I stare back at them for a moment. It's because it's our nature. That's why I want you to read or hear the Mark Yaconelli interview. It's our nature. That's who we are as a species. That's who we were with the very first cave people. The very first cave people picked someone who seemed to want to do it, and they had him or her, probably him, sit down in the middle of the campfire and start telling these stories of their own lives and of the people who had gone before them, if, in fact, they weren't the first batch. I think that most of your characters believe, as children believe, that if the truth were known, that we'd be seen as good people. We have so much shame and guilt. And when we write, we see that our truth was that we're really good people. What could be more magical? What could be a bigger change in your life than to get to that? Truth seems to want expression. Unacknowledged truth saps your energy and keeps you and your characters wired and delusional. But when you open the closet door and you let what was inside out, you get a rush of liberation and joy. If we can believe the Gnostic gospel of Thomas, old Uncle Jesus said that if you bring forth what is inside of you, what you bring forth will save you. And if you don't bring forth what is inside of you, what you bring forth can destroy you. So you bring it forth. It doesn't mean you're going to publish it. You bring it forth, you get it down. I hope some of you made connection with each other at your tables or over lunches or whatever, because if you have each other's emails and phone numbers and you will reach out and say, what if we started meeting at someone's house on the first weekend of every month? Or I think Terry's group met on the second Thursday. So I always suggest that writing groups meet on the second Thursday. And best if it's at an independent bookstore, because we're going to keep them alive. And if you shop at independent bookstores, you will get better seats in heaven. And it's just true. I'm a Sunday school teacher. It just happens to be true. So what I want to leave you with is a story I read about. I've been telling a story at writing groups for 25 years. And I heard it on NPR. So it must be true. There was a group of scientists on the East Coast, I believe Boston, and they were working with severely autistic grown-ups, people who were so differently wired that they wouldn't look at anyone and they wouldn't stand. And if you stood them up, they'd sit back down. It wouldn't even see that you were not acknowledge in any way that anybody else was there. They made this discovery that if they put a big piece of cord, of rope, from one end of the room to the other end, attached it firmly, and got people up and put their hand around the rope and stood there with them for a minute, the people would walk across the room. So they let them do this for a while, for weeks. And after a while, they put up a much thinner cord, a rope instead of a thick cord, attached it at both ends, and they'd get people up now who are into it because they had so much success with the bigger cord, put their hands around the cord, and they'd walk across the room. They didn't need to do it for as long anymore, maybe just a few days, a piece of rope, and it goes, and on and on. And you put rope, you put them hold a laundry line, and they would walk all the way across the room. So that's brilliant, but here's the miracle, here's the genius. At some point, they got some fishing line, which is invisible. And they strung the fishing line at one end of the room and all the way over to the other. And they stood people up who are now much more into it, and they put their hand around the fishing line. And every single person walked across that room. So I brought you all some fishing line. And, oh no, wait, I forgot the genius part. Oh my God. They cut it into 1-inch lengths. After they'd done several days of it being intact, they started people over here, and they handed them a 12-inch, foot-long piece of fishing line, right? And they walk across the room. So that's what we're talking about today. Over there by my colleague with the camera, okay, the people in front of him, Jane and Susan, have some pre-cut foot-long fishing line that my grandson cut and I cut. And you can go see them, and I want you to take it with you. Thank you.